kick off with the only place where we can kick off, and that is going to be The Matrix Resurrections. This is the fourth film in The Matrix, what used to be a trilogy and is now, we don't know what it is, and directed by one of the returning directors. So you had the Wachowskis. I think that is the safest thing to call to say right now. The Wachowskis directed the original trilogy, and now only one of them, Lana Wachowski, has come back to direct the fourth film. And this is a film that when they announced it, I said, this is a terrible idea. Why are you even doing this? I hoped that there was a little bit more integrity about this thing, because the first three were well contained. It was a story. It had finished. The second and the third films were... I am in the camp that says that they were largely underwhelming and didn't make much sense and were not as much fun. The first one was an absolute stone cold classic. That was like, I remember walking out of the cinema, and you walk out of the cinema and you go, this is a film I'll be watching for years to come. That film was amazing. That film was good. And it still holds up. You watch the original film, it still holds up. And so I just thought, why on earth are they making this film? And obviously the answer, as with anything film-wise, is money. Somebody likes money. And so they wanted to make this film. And so the funny thing about this is that Lana Wachowski, who wrote the script along with some other people and directed it, this film is... Let me put it this way. The first Matrix film was almost like a straightforward adventure. Then the second and the third films went a little bit more philosophical, and you can see that they were indulging a lot of the things that they were interested in and trying to put them into a sort of blockbuster film. And this film does that even more. So the first, and it's almost impossible to talk about this film without giving any spoilers whatsoever. So there are going to be some spoilers. This film starts off, and it pretty much asks the question, why the hell does this film exist? Okay. So that there's a bit in it. It might not answer it, but it asks the question. There's a bit in the film, because bearing in mind that Warner Brothers are the ones who released the Matrix films. There's a line in the film where somebody says, our parent company Warner Brothers wants us to make a fourth Matrix, and whether it's going to happen with or without you. So what are you gonna do? So essentially, let me put it this way, Shara. The first hour of this film is crazily meta. It is crazily meta. So the film starts off, and the first scene of the film looks like the first scene in the first Matrix movie. So police burst into a room. Trinity, a woman clad in PVC, is sat at a desk backing away. They're like, put your hands up. She jumps up. She jumps around the wall, starts beating them up and all that. And then you're thinking, hang on a second, we've seen this before. This is the first Matrix film. Then the camera pulls out, and what you actually see is you see another character watching the first scene from the first Matrix and saying, hang on, there's something a little bit different here. And then there's all this stuff going on, and you're like, hang on, what the heck is going? And then you meet Keanu Reeves, who has long hair and a beard now, looking very much like John Wick. And he turns, but everybody refers to him as Thomas Anderson. And Thomas Anderson is a world famous video game creator who created a trilogy of video games called The Matrix.
Oh, right.
And so essentially the first hour or so of this film is not really about story or anything. The first hour of this film is about the Matrix itself. And so this is the point where it could disappear up its own bum. It could disappear up its own bum, where it's essentially, this film is talking to you. It's kind of like somebody having a conversation with you, and it's almost the filmmaker talking to you about, this is what we made with The Matrix, and this is why this film is being made. And it is, and I think it's quite it's quite brave for them to make something like this. And I think the fact that the film studio actually let them do this, I really, really like, because it's essentially talking about the nature of trying to make sequels and why you're making the sequel. This film pretty much calls the studio that made the film money hungry, money grabbing people. And all that stuff is going on, and I was sitting down there going, ooh, some people are going to hate this, but I'm kind of liking it. I kind of like the fact that they acknowledge the fact that it is stupid for this film to exist. that is, and how this film exists. But then after that, some things happen that become a bit more adventure-y, matrixy, plot-driven stuff that happens and then that's when I think the film falls down a bit. The action is nowhere near as good. I mean, there are some plot points that they pick up from the second and third films, which, as I thought the second and third films were confusing. I thought they didn't make much sense. I thought that they were trying to do too many philosophical things that just kind of like, and they pick some of those things up. There is one particular scene that makes no sense. You have some characters who show up from the other Matrix films, do nothing, and they have this whole fight scene about it. You're like, what? Why is that happening? Why is that guy just standing there yelling? Why is that? What is going on? And the action, I don't think, is anywhere near even it's the action in the first Matrix films, brilliant. Second and third, not so good. But the action in this one is not even as good as the second and third films, which you would have thought, look, time has moved on. You could do more things with it. There's a bit where Neo says, "I still know Kung Fu," and then he proceeds to go through the rest of the film not doing any Kung Fu. and where the film ends up, it's almost kind of like it felt to me a little bit like the filmmakers looked back and went, hang on a second, when we made these other films, we were younger. There were some things that maybe we weren't allowed to do that in the film. Maybe there were some characters that we wanted to give a bigger role that we weren't allowed to give a bigger role that back then, possibly because they were women. And now this is a chance to fix that and to put those sort of things in, or to change that aspect of the story. And part of that, essentially, a lot of this film, the conversation you'll be having with yourself is not necessarily about what you're watching on the screen. It's about what you're watching on the screen means for the wider context and what it means for the wider world and for the Wachowskis and for the original Matrix films and all that. So for a sequel that's made way after, anybody should care, a bit like the Avatar films that are coming up, it's like I think that I have to applaud Lana Wachowski for trying to do something that wasn't just your standard sequel, for acknowledging the fact that, look, it's a bit stupid that this film was getting made. And yeah, all in all, although I think I would give it a 3. I'd give it a 3. Okay. I think the first hour where it's been a bit weird and it's messing with your mind, I actually quite enjoyed that, because it's like it showed a high level of self-awareness of what this thing is and of the fact that we've been made to make this film. We don't particularly want to make this film, but we've been made to make this film. That's where I read it anyway. So that's it. For me, it'll be a 3 stars for The Matrix Resurrections. Any questions, Sharon?
Not really. I mean, my only observations rather than questions were that where I wasn't really on the Matrix bandwagon, it didn't really appeal to me, so I don't feel like I've missed an awful lot by not seeing. I don't think it's like essential viewing, but it just seems to be tapping into this sort of wave of nostalgia films that we're getting, or these nostalgia sequels we're getting, because it's like Ghostbusters Aftermath, and there's a new Scream coming out, and then
yes, that's true.
Matrix new reincarnation. It's almost like there's this nostalgia where people are taking films that they suddenly look at and go, hang on a minute, do you know that film is 20 years old now, or 30 years old in some cases? And they're suddenly saying, if we're going to, let's revisit that and sort of celebrate the original film by making a new sequel. So I think it's just sort of tapping into, I don't know why we suddenly getting this sort of wave of these nostalgia films, but it's
because you think about it, there's a lot of the Rings TV series coming to Amazon, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's true. I think it might link to what we were talking about before, where we're talking about
the pandemic. I suppose people are living in this sort of limbo, and they're just harking back to a safer, maybe a happier time when they.
Well, a lot of these were greenlit before the pandemic started. I definitely know the Matrix was greenlit before the pandemic started. The Lord of the Rings show on Amazon was greenlit before the pandemic started. But I agree with you. I think it is essentially Hollywood getting less and less risk averse, because I think nowadays, all the things we're talking about with cinemas, it's harder to take a risk and have that risk pay off financially. So I think that with this, what my suspicion and what is pretty much confirmed in the film is that you had some studio executive that was saying, oh, hang on a second, there's money to be made in reviving this old, they now have a title for a legacy sequel. It's
Oh,
like
okay.
they're like there's money to be made from that, and then they said that for what the film tells you is that pretty much the studio who have the rights to make these films, they essentially told the filmmakers, we're going to make this film and you're either going to be part of it or you're not going to be part of it. Would you rather somebody else took a took a hold of it?
Yeah, took
And the
hold of
filmmaker
your
went,
legacy,
exactly,
your
and the
vision,
filmmaker
and
went,
made it their own.
yeah, and the filmmaker went, no, 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 we'll sort this out. And when they did that, so but the fact that they've essentially the Matrix Resurrections is unlike any other. It's unlike any other legacy sequel that's out there. It is, you have Ghostbusters Afterlife. This is going to be very different from that. It's good from whatever. I mean, I'm blanking now on legacy sequels. Oh, Blade Runner 2049. This is going to be different from that.
Yeah,
Like all these sequels that are being made years after is
yeah, because we've
definitely
got
going to be.
themes
It's definitely
coming up.
different and it's definitely better than the Star Wars sequels. So I'll give you that. It at least tries to do something. At least seems to
Yeah.
have some integrity, but it kind of falls down as the longer the film goes on. But anyway, yeah, that's 3 stars for the Matrix Resurrections. And